I have lived long enough to notice something about people. The ones who talk the loudest about their worth are often the ones who understand it the least. And the ones who stay quiet, who do the work without asking for credit, those are the ones you should watch. They carry more than anyone knows. I learned this from a story I once heard. About a man who had everything except the sense to see what was right in front of him. The champagne glass caught the afternoon light as Richard Hayes raised it toward his friends. "Gentlemen," he said, "I'll take that bet." Laughter rolled across the private room of the golf club. 4 men in their 50s, all of them worth more than most would see in 10 lifetimes, leaning back in leather chairs. "You're serious?" David Porter set down his whiskey. "Marry someone beneath you and turn her into arm candy. Not just beneath me." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Someone so ordinary that none of you would look twice." He swirled his drink slowly. "There's a girl who works at the coffee shop near my office. Plain, quiet, smiles at everyone like she means it. And she'll say yes." Richard's voice dropped. "Everyone has a price." The coffee shop smelled of burnt espresso and floor cleaner. Richard pushed through the door at 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes before closing. He had watched her routine for 2 weeks. She always wiped down the same tables in the same order, always hummed something soft under her breath. Clara looked up from behind the counter. Her hair was pulled back, a few strands loose against her neck. No makeup. Apron stained with coffee grounds. "We're closing soon," she said. "But I can make you something quick. Just black coffee." She turned to the machine. Richard studied the back of her head, the way her shoulders curved slightly forward. Tired posture, working class posture. Perfect. He sat at the corner table and waited. The other chairs were already flipped upside down on their tables. A fluorescent light flickered near the bathroom. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath before shutting down for the night. Clara brought his cup over, set it down carefully. "Anything else? Sit with me." She hesitated, glanced toward the kitchen where someone was running water. "I have to finish closing." 5 minutes. Richard gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." Something in his tone, or maybe just exhaustion, made her sit. "I've seen you here before," she said. "You always order black coffee. Never stay long. I've been watching you." Her hands went still on the table. "That's an unusual thing to say." "I'm an unusual man." Richard leaned forward. "I'll be direct. I need a wife. Not for love, I don't believe in that. For appearances. For a year. Maybe 2. In exchange, you'll have a life most people only dream about." Clara's face didn't change. She sat there, looking at him like he had spoken in a foreign language. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough. You work double shifts. You send money somewhere family. I assume you're drowning, and I'm offering you air." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't move to check it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Clara's jaw tightened. She stood up, walked to the counter, looked at the screen. Her face went pale. When she came back to the table, something had shifted in her eyes. When Richard smiled, "Tomorrow," she didn't smile back, just nodded once, slowly, like a person stepping off a ledge. Her phone was still in her hand. Richard caught a glimpse of the screen before she turned it face down. 3 missed calls, 1 text message, the name at the top, Daniel Hospital. The wedding took place on a Tuesday afternoon in a registrar's office with beige walls and a water stain on the ceiling. Richard wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Clara had earned in 6 months at the coffee shop. She wore a white dress from a department store clearance rack. He had not offered to buy her anything, and she had not asked. His friend stood near the back, David Porter, Marcus Webb, two others whose names Clara had not caught. They watched her the way men examine something at auction. When the registrar asked if she took this man, Clara's voice came out flat, steady, like reading from a receipt. "I do." Richard slid the ring onto her finger, thin gold band, the kind you give someone you do not plan to keep. Clara looked at it, then at him. His eyes were already elsewhere, checking his watch, nodding to his friends. She turned the ring once on her finger, cold metal against warm skin. That night, Richard showed her to the penthouse, 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, white furniture that looked like no one had ever used it. "Your room is at the end of the hall," he said, loosening his tie. "Mine is on the opposite side. I trust that's clear." Clara nodded. "The housekeeper comes Mondays and Thursdays, Mrs. Patterson. She'll handle anything you need." He paused at his bedroom door. "We have dinner with my mother next week. Try to look presentable." The door clicked shut. Clara stood alone in the living room. The city lights glittered below like scattered coins. Everything smelled of leather and cleaning products. No warmth, no history, just expensive emptiness. She walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Her phone vibrated in her purse. She pulled it out. A text from an unknown number, but she knew who it was. The hospital billing department did not text this late. Payment received. Next installment due in 30 days. Current balance, $187,000. Clara closed her eyes, let out a breath she had been holding since she said those two words at the registrar's office. She had tried everything before this, every charity, every assistance program, every payment plan the hospital offered. All of them had waiting lists longer than Daniel had time. This was the only door left. She typed back one word, confirmed. Then she walked to her room at the end of the hall, opened the door, queen bed, white sheets, empty closet. She sat on the edge of the mattress, did not turn on the lights. Somewhere in her purse. Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time. She almost did not check. But then she saw the name. Daniel. Her brother. Calling from the hospital at 11 at night. Clara's thumb hovered over the screen. Daniel never called this late unless something had gone wrong. 3 weeks passed. Richard settled into a routine of ignoring his wife. He left for work before 7, returned after 9, sometimes later. Clara existed in the periphery of his vision, a shadow moving through rooms, a closed door at the end of the hallway. The dinner party arrived on a Friday evening. 8 guests, crystal glasses. A private chef Richard had flown in from Chicago. Clara wore a black dress he had sent that morning. No note attached. Just a garment bag on her bed and an unspoken expectation. She stood near the window as guests filtered in. Richard's hand found the small of her back the first time he had touched her since the wedding. His fingers pressed firmly. A warning, not affection. "This is my wife," he said to David Porter. "Clara." David's eyes moved down her body, then back up. "Charming." Richard smiled. "She's learning." The laughter that followed scraped against Clara's ears. She kept her expression neutral, lifted her wine glass, did not drink, across the room. An older man with silver hair watched the exchange without laughing. Marcus Webb. He stood apart from the others, whiskey in hand, studying Clara with an expression she could not read. Dinner stretched for 2 hours. Clara said little, smiled when expected, answered questions about her background with half-truths. She had worked in customer service, yes, lived modestly, nothing worth discussing. Richard interrupted whenever her answers grew too long, redirected conversations, made jokes at her expense that the table received with practiced amusement. She made coffee for a living, he said during dessert. Now she drinks champagne worth more than her old paycheck. More laughter. Clara's fingers tightened around her napkin beneath the table. Her knuckles went white. She did not look up, did not react. But she felt Marcus Webb's eyes on her, still watching, still quiet. After midnight, when the last guest had gone, Richard loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. "You did adequately," he said without turning around. "Work on your posture, and smile more. You looked half dead." Clara gathered the empty glasses from the coffee table, carried them to the kitchen, said nothing. Richard's phone rang. He answered it, walking toward his study, already forgetting she was there. Clara washed the glasses by hand. The warm water ran over her fingers. Steam rose toward her face. Behind her, the penthouse stretched out in expensive silence. Mrs. Patterson would not come until Monday. There was no one to see her here, no one to perform for. She dried her hands, walked to the guest bathroom, closed the door. In the mirror, a stranger stared back. Black dress, pearl earrings she had borrowed from a display case in the bedroom, hair pinned up in a style she had learned from a video at 5 in the morning. Her hands trembled slightly, just slightly. She gripped the edge of the sink, breathed in, breathed out. Tomorrow, she would call Daniel, check on his latest test results, transfer another payment to the hospital. Tomorrow, she would keep going. But right now, in this bathroom that smelled of lavender soap and new towels, Clara allowed herself 30 seconds. 30 seconds to close her eyes, to let her shoulders drop, to feel the weight of everything she carried. When she opened her eyes again, the stranger in the mirror had composed herself. Clara smoothed her dress, unlocked the door. She found Mrs. Patterson's cleaning schedule pinned to the refrigerator, Monday and Thursday. The housekeeper had written her phone number at the bottom in careful cursive. Beneath that, a sticky note Clara had not noticed before. "Call me if you need anything." "Meh." Clara peeled the note from the refrigerator, studied it. A housekeeper who left personal notes, who offered help before being asked. Strange. She tucked the note into her pocket and walked toward her room. Behind her, Richard's study door remained closed. Light spilled from beneath it. His voice carried through low, businesslike, discussing quarterly projections. Clara paused at her bedroom door. Her hand rested on the handle. From the living room. Her phone buzzed against the coffee table where she had left it. She walked back, picked it up. A text from Marcus Webb. She did not remember giving him her number. "I knew your brother's doctor. We should talk." Clara read the message twice. 3 times. Her brother's doctor. How did Marcus Webb know about Daniel? The cafe where Marcus Webb wanted to meet sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the hospital. Clara arrived early, chose a table near the back where she could see the door. Her coffee grew cold while she waited. Marcus walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, gray overcoat, silver hair combed back. He moved like a man who had learned patience the hard way, slow steps, careful eyes. He sat across from her without ordering anything. "You're wondering how I know," he said. Clara's hands stayed flat on the table. "Yes. My daughter is a hepatologist at St. Vincent's, Dr. Sarah Webb. She's been treating your brother for 11 months. The name clicked into place. Dr. Webb. Daniel had mentioned her one of the few doctors who still took time to explain things, who did not rush through appointments. "She told you about me?" "No. Patient confidentiality." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I recognized you at Richard's wedding. You applied for a position at Hayes Industries 2 years ago. Administrative assistant. I was on the hiring committee." Clara remembered. The interview had gone well. Then nothing. No callback. No rejection letter. Just silence. "You weren't hired because you didn't have a degree," Marcus continued. "Company policy. Nothing personal." "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus studied her face for a long moment. Outside. A bus rumbled past. Someone at the counter laughed at something the barista said. "Because I've watched Richard for 30 years, he said finally. "I know what he's capable of. And I know what he's doing to you." Clara's jaw tightened. "I made my choice." "Did you?" Marcus reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, slid it across the table. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, for 2 years. Your brother's treatment costs more than most people earn in a decade. You tried every charity, every assistance program, every payment plan. And then Richard Hayes walked into your coffee shop with an offer you couldn't refuse. Clara did not touch the paper. She knew what it said. Her own history, laid out in black and white. "What do you want from me?" Marcus stood up, buttoned his coat. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that someone sees you. Someone knows what you're carrying." He paused. "And if the time comes when you need help, real help, you have my number." He walked out without looking back. Clara sat alone at the table. The cafe noise washed over her clinking cups, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. She unfolded the paper Marcus had left. It was not her history. It was a medical report. Daniel's latest test results. Liver function declining. New timeline for transplant, 6 months. Maybe less. At the bottom, a handwritten note in unfamiliar script donor match found compatibility 94%. Donor name, Clara Morrison. Clara stared at the paper. Read it again. She had registered as a donor 3 months ago, filled out the forms, and heard nothing since. Someone had accessed her file. Someone had run the match. And someone had given this information to Marcus Webb. Clara folded the paper carefully, slipped it into her purse. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. But inside her chest, something shifted. A decision taking shape before she could name it. 6 months. She had 6 months to save her brother's life. And if that meant giving a piece of herself literally, she would do it without hesitation. The question was whether her body would hold out long enough, whether Richard would notice, whether any of it would matter if Daniel's condition worsened before they could operate. Clara left money on the table for the untouched coffee. Walked out into the gray afternoon. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard's mother coming for dinner tonight. "Be ready by 6. She typed back, "I'll be there." Then she opened a new message. Found Dr. Webb's contact information from Daniel's discharge papers. I saw my test results. When can we talk? The reply came within minutes. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Come alone. Clara deleted the message thread, cleared her call history. Richard could not know. Not yet, maybe not ever. She walked toward the subway station. The city moved around her cars. Pedestrians, pigeons pecking at trash. No one looked at her twice. No one saw the woman carrying a decision heavy enough to change everything. That evening, she stood in the penthouse kitchen preparing tea while Eleanor Hayes inspected the apartment like a health inspector searching for violations. "The curtains need changing," Eleanor said. "These are last season." Clara poured hot water into the porcelain cups. I'll look into it. And your posture. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Stand up straight. You're not serving tables anymore. The teacup trembled slightly in Clara's grip. She set it down before Eleanor could notice. Yes, Mrs. Hayes. Richard arrived home at 7, kissed his mother's cheek, did not acknowledge Clara beyond a brief nod. Dinner was roast chicken and vegetables. Clara had cooked it herself, Mrs. Patterson had left instructions, and Clara had followed them precisely. Eleanor ate 3 bites before pushing her plate away. Dry, she said. Richard shrugged. She's learning. Clara collected the plates, carried them to the kitchen, washed them by hand, while Richard and his mother talked in the living room about investments and vacation properties. Their voices carried through the open doorway. Clara caught fragments, something about a charity gala, something about Richard's ex-girlfriend getting engaged. You could have done better, Eleanor said, loud enough to be heard in the kitchen. I don't understand why you chose this. Clara's hands went still in the soapy water. Richard's response came lower, muffled, but she heard one word clearly. Temporary. Her fingers curled around the edge of a plate. Temporary. Of course. She had always known that. But hearing it spoken aloud, like weather or traffic that was different. She finished the dishes, dried her hands, walked to the living room with a practiced smile. More tea, Mrs. Hayes? Eleanor looked at her the way one might look at a stain on the carpet. No, I'm leaving. She stood, gathered her purse, kissed Richard's cheek again. Call me tomorrow. We need to discuss the foundation board. She left without saying goodbye to Clara. The door clicked shut. Richard loosened his tie. She doesn't like me, Clara said. She doesn't need to like you. Richard poured himself a scotch. She needs to tolerate you, which she will, as long as you don't embarrass me. Clara watched him drink. The amber liquid caught the lamplight. What happens when this is over? She asked. Richard paused, looked at her with something between surprise and irritation. Over, you said temporary. What happens after? Richard set down his glass, walked toward his study. You'll get what you need, and I'll get what I need. That's the arrangement. The study door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in the living room. The city lights glittered beyond the windows. She pulled out her phone, checked the calendar. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Dr. Webb. In less than 12 hours, she would know exactly what saving Daniel's life would cost her. Dr. Sarah Webb's office smelled of hand sanitizer and old paper, medical journals stacked on the windowsill, a wilting plant in the corner that no one had watered in weeks. Clara sat in the plastic chair across from the desk. Her hands rested on her knees. Still, controlled. Dr. Webb was younger than Clara expected. Late 30s. Dark hair pulled back. Glasses perched on her nose. She flipped through a manila folder without looking up. You registered as a living donor 3 months ago, she said. We ran the compatibility tests last week. You're a match for your brother. I know. Your father showed me the results. Dr. Webb's pen stopped moving. She looked up. My father, Marcus Webb, he gave me the report yesterday. Something shifted in Dr. Webb's expression. A flicker of surprise, quickly suppressed. I see. She closed the folder. That wasn't supposed to happen. Patient confidentiality exists for a reason. I'm not here to file a complaint. I'm here to talk about the surgery. Dr. Webb studied her for a long moment. The clock on the wall ticked. Someone walked past the door, footsteps echoing down the hallway. Living donor liver transplants are serious procedures, Dr. Webb said finally. You'd be giving up approximately 60% of your liver. Recovery takes 6 to 8 weeks minimum. There are risks: bleeding, infection, bile leakage, in rare cases, liver failure. Clara's fingers pressed against her kneecaps. What are the chances Daniel survives without the transplant? Less than 20%. His liver function is declining faster than we projected. 6 months was optimistic. Realistically, we're looking at 4. 4 months. Clara's throat tightened. She swallowed it down. And with the transplant, 75 to 80% survival rate, given his age and overall health. Dr. Webb leaned forward. But I need to be clear with you. Mrs. Hayes, this isn't a small thing. You'll need time off. Rest. Monitoring. Does your husband know you're considering this? Clara's jaw tensed at the name. Mrs. Hayes. A title that still felt like borrowed clothing. No. Will you tell him, I don't know? Dr. Webb removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. The surgery requires full consent. Psychological evaluation. We need to ensure you're not being coerced, that this is truly your choice. It is. You answered very quickly. Because there's nothing to think about. Clara met her eyes. He's my brother. He's all I have left. If I can save him, I will. Dr. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of forms. These are the consent documents. Read them carefully. We'll need to schedule a full physical examination. Blood work, imaging. Given your brother's timeline, we've fast-tracked your case. The psychological evaluation happens next week. Clara took the papers. Thick stack. Heavy in her hands. How soon can we do the surgery? If everything checks out, 5 weeks, maybe 6. Dr. Webb paused. There's one more thing. Clara waited. After the surgery, you'll be vulnerable, physically weak. You'll need someone to take care of you during recovery. Someone you trust. Clara thought of the penthouse, the empty hallways, Richard's closed door. I'll manage. Dr. Webb did not look convinced, but she did not argue. Schedule your physical with the front desk. I'll see you next week for the psych eval. Clara stood, tucked the papers into her bag. Dr. Webb. Yes. Your father. Why did he give me those results? Why does he care? Dr. Webb hesitated. Her fingers drummed against the desk once, twice. My father has known Richard Hayes for 30 years. He's seen a lot of things. Not all of them good. She met Clara's eyes. I think he saw something in you that reminded him it's not too late to do the right thing. Clara nodded, turned toward the door. Mrs. Hayes. She stopped, hand on the doorframe. I've treated a lot of patients, a lot of families. Most people say they'd do anything for the people they love. Very few actually mean it. Dr. Webb's voice softened slightly. You mean it. I can tell. Clara did not respond. She walked out of the office, down the hallway, past the nurse's station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A child cried somewhere behind a closed door. She found the elevator, pressed the button, waited. The doors opened. She stepped inside. Alone. As the elevator descended, she pulled out her phone. Opened the text thread with Daniel. His last message. From 2 days ago. Don't worry about me, Clara. I'm fine. Focus on your new life. Her new life. Clara leaned against the elevator wall, closed her eyes. Daniel did not know. He thought she had married a good man, a wealthy man who would take care of her. She had told him that story because it was easier than the truth, because the truth would break him. The elevator reached the ground floor. Doors opened. Clara walked through the lobby, past the gift shop, past the information desk. Outside, the morning air was cool. Gray clouds hung low over the city. She had 5 weeks, maybe 6. 5 weeks to prepare her body, to hide the truth from Richard, to pretend everything was normal. 5 weeks before they would cut her open and take a piece of her liver. Clara walked toward the subway. Her bag felt heavier than before. The consent forms inside pressed against her hip. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard's assistant, Mr. Hayes, requires your presence at the office. 2 p.m. Dress appropriately. Clara stared at the message. Richard had never asked her to come to his office. Not once in 6 weeks of marriage. Why now? She typed back, I'll be there. Then she descended into the subway station, disappearing into the crowd. At 1:45 p.m., Clara stood outside Hayes Industries headquarters. Glass tower, 40 floors of steel and ambition. Richard's name was not on the building, but it might as well have been. She wore the navy dress he had sent last week. Low heels, pearl earrings, the costume of a wealthy man's wife. The lobby smelled of marble polish and money. A security guard checked her ID, called upstairs, nodded her toward the private elevator. Floor 38, executive suite. Richard's assistant, a blonde woman in her 40s with a practiced smile, led Clara down a hallway lined with abstract art worth more than houses. He's in a meeting, the assistant said. It should end shortly. You can wait in the conference room. Clara sat in a leather chair facing floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below. Cars like insects, people like dots. 15 minutes passed. Then the door opened. Richard walked in. Behind him, another man. Tall, gray suit. Face Clara did not recognize. Ah, Richard said. There she is. He did not smile. Neither did the other man. Clara, this is Thomas Whitfield. He handles certain sensitive matters for me. Thomas Whitfield extended his hand. Cold grip. Eyes that gave nothing away. Mrs. Hayes. Pleasure. Clara shook his hand. Released it quickly. What's this about? Richard sat across from her, loosened his tie. His expression was unreadable. Thomas recently completed some background research, standard procedure for anyone connected to the Hayes family. Richard's fingers drummed against the table. Imagine my surprise when I discovered my wife has been making regular payments to St. Vincent's Hospital. Clara's blood went cold. Payments for a patient named Daniel Morrison. Your brother, apparently. Richard tilted his head. The brother you never mentioned. The one who's dying. The room fell silent. Clara's hands gripped the armrests. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why didn't you tell me? Richard asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. Clara forced herself to breathe. In, out. Because it's none of your business. Richard's eyes narrowed. Thomas Whitfield shifted slightly in his chair. Watching, recording every detail. Everything about you is my business, Richard said slowly. That was the arrangement. No secrets, no surprises. Clara stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. I held up my end. I show up. I smile. I play the part. Her voice was steady, but barely. What I do with my own money, the money you gave me, is mine. Richard leaned back. Something flickered across his face. Not anger. Something else. Sit down. No. The word hung in the air. Thomas Whitfield's hand moved toward his jacket. A subtle gesture. Clara noticed it. "I said sit down." Clara did not move. Richard's jaw tightened. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Short, humorless. "You've got spine. I'll give you that." He waved Thomas toward the door. "Leave us." Thomas hesitated, then nodded and walked out. The door closed. Richard and Clara faced each other across the conference table. "Your brother needs a liver transplant," Richard said. "I know. I saw the medical records." Clara's stomach dropped. "You accessed his medical records. I access everything." Richard stood, walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him. "What I don't understand is why you didn't just ask me." Clara stared at his back. "Ask you? For the money? For the surgery? For whatever he needs?" Richard turned to face her. "I would have paid for it, easily. It's nothing to me." Clara's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists. "I didn't marry you to beg. You married me because you had no other choice. Let's not pretend otherwise." Richard stepped closer. "But that doesn't mean I want your brother to die, contrary to what you might think. I'm not heartless." Clara held his gaze. "Then why are we here? Why the interrogation?" Richard stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, cold. "Because I found something else in those records." His voice dropped. "You registered as a living donor. You're planning to give him part of your liver?" Clara's breath caught. "The surgery is dangerous," Richard continued. "Recovery takes weeks. And you did all of this without telling me." He paused. "Were you going to disappear one day, check into the hospital, and hope I didn't notice?" Clara's throat was dry. "I was going to figure it out. Figure it out." Richard repeated the words slowly, like tasting something bitter. "You were going to let strangers cut you open, risk your life, and figure it out." He shook his head. "You really don't understand how any of this works, do you?" Clara stepped back, created distance between them. "I understand perfectly. You need a wife who looks good and stays quiet. That's what I've been. That's what I'll continue to be. But my brother, my body, that's not part of the arrangement." Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he did something Clara did not expect. He nodded. "Fine." He walked back toward the door. "Do what you need to do. I won't stop you." Clara blinked. "That's it." Richard paused with his hand on the handle. "One condition." He looked back at her. "After the surgery, when you're recovering, you'll do it here, in the penthouse, where my staff can monitor you." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Richard's expression was unreadable. "Because if something goes wrong, I don't want it traced back to me. And because—" He hesitated, just for a second. "Because it would look bad if my wife ended up in a hospital alone and I wasn't there." He opened the door, stepped through. "My driver will take you home. We're done here." The door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in the conference room. The city spread out below the windows. Richard knew. He knew everything. And he was letting her do it anyway. The question was why. The night Richard chose to speak was 3 weeks before Clara's scheduled surgery. She was folding laundry in her room, a habit she could not break. Even with Mrs. Patterson available when she heard his footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside her door. A knock. He had never knocked before. Clara opened the door. Richard stood there in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His third of the evening. judging by the flush on his neck. "We need to talk." Clara stepped aside. "Let him in?" He walked to the window, stared out at the city lights. The room felt smaller with him in it. "I know about the surgery date," he said without turning around. 3 weeks, December 14th. Clara folded her arms across her chest. And I've been thinking." He turned to face her. His eyes were different tonight, darker, searching. "About what kind of person does what you're doing? Someone who loves their brother." "No." Richard shook his head. "People say they love their family. They send cards. They visit on holidays. They don't let doctors cut out pieces of their organs." Clara's jaw tightened. "Maybe you just don't know anyone like that." Richard laughed. Short, hollow. "You're right. I don't." He set his glass on her nightstand, took a step closer. "I grew up with people who would sell their own mothers for the right business deal. My father certainly would have. My mother would have watched and taken notes." Clara did not respond. She watched him the way one watches an approaching storm. "When I married you," Richard continued, "I thought I knew exactly what you were. Poor, desperate, willing to trade dignity for security." He paused. "I was wrong." The admission hung in the air like smoke. "What changed your mind?" Richard's fingers tapped against his thigh, a nervous habit she had never noticed before. "The night after the dinner party, I heard you on the phone with your brother. I was in the hallway. You didn't know." Clara's blood chilled. She remembered that call. Daniel had been crying. The test results had come back worse than expected. She had spent 40 minutes talking him through the panic, promising everything would be okay. "What did you hear?" "Enough." Richard's voice dropped. "You told him not to worry about the money, that you had it handled, that you would take care of everything, no matter what." Clara's throat constricted. "And then you hung up," Richard said. "And you went into the bathroom, and you turned on the shower, and you stayed in there for 20 minutes. Clara's face burned, her hands clenched at her sides. He had heard her. He had heard everything. "I stood outside that door," Richard continued. "I almost knocked. I almost asked if you were okay." He laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "Can you imagine me asking if someone was okay? I didn't even know how—" Clara's voice came out tight, controlled. "Why are you telling me this?" Richard looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time since they had met, there was something vulnerable in his expression, something cracked. "Because I need you to understand something." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples. "I've spent my entire life believing that everyone has an angle, that kindness is just weakness in disguise, that the only thing that matters is winning." He stopped. His chest rose and fell. "And then you came along. And you're giving away pieces of yourself literally for someone who can't give you anything back. And you're not asking for credit. You're not asking for recognition. You're just doing it." Clara's eyes stung. She blinked hard. "He's my brother." "I know." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "That's what I don't understand. How can someone love like that? How can someone give like that?" The question was not rhetorical. He was genuinely asking. Clara looked at the man in front of her. The man who had humiliated her in front of his friends, who had called her a trophy, who had treated her like furniture for months. And yet here he stood, confused, lost, trying to understand something his entire life had never taught him. Richard. His name felt strange on her tongue. She had called him that exactly twice before. "Sit down." He sat on the edge of her bed. His hands hung between his knees. He looked, suddenly, like a boy who had been caught doing something wrong. Clara sat beside him, not close, but closer than she had ever chosen to be. "You want to know how someone loves like that?" He nodded. "You don't learn it," Clara said quietly. "It's not a skill. It's not a strategy. It's just who you are. It's the only thing that makes any of this bearable." Richard stared at the floor. His shoulders were tense. "I don't know how to do that. I know. I've hurt you. A lot. I know that too." He looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from drinking, from something else. Is it possible to learn at 52 years old? Is it too late?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. The clock on the nightstand ticked. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the city. "I don't know," she said finally. "But asking the question that's more than most people do." Richard nodded slowly. He stood up, walked toward the door. "Clara?" She looked at him. "The surgery. I'll be there, at the hospital. If you want." Clara blinked. "Why?" Richard's hand rested on the door handle. His back was to her. "Because maybe that's how it starts, showing up when you don't have to." He opened the door. Paused. "I'm sorry, for everything." The words came out rough, unpracticed, like he had never said them before in his life. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. Clara sat on the bed, alone. Her hands were shaking. She had expected many things from Richard Hayes: cruelty, indifference, manipulation. She had never expected an apology, and she had certainly never expected it to sound real. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dr. Webb, pre-op appointment confirmed. December 12th, 8 a.m., 2 days before they would cut her open. 2 days before everything would change. Clara set the phone down, lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling. Richard's words echoed in her mind. Showing up when you don't have to. Was that how it started? Was that how someone learned to be human? She did not know. But for the first time since she had walked into this penthouse, she felt something other than dread. She felt the smallest flicker of something she could not name. And that unsettled her more than anything else. The pre-op appointment went smoothly. Blood work, imaging, final consultations. Dr. Webb pronounced Clara in excellent health, all things considered. "You're cleared for surgery," she said. December 14th, 6 a.m. check-in. Clara nodded. Signed the final consent forms. "Is there anything else you need?" Dr. Webb asked. Clara hesitated. "My brother. Can I see him before?" "Of course, room 412. He's been asking about you." Clara walked through the hospital corridors. The smell of antiseptic. The squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. A child crying somewhere behind a curtain. Room 412. She knocked. "Come in." Daniel sat propped up in bed, thin, pale, but his eyes brightened when he saw her. "Clara." She crossed the room, took his hand, felt how fragile his fingers had become. "Hey, little brother." "You look tired." "I'm fine." Daniel squeezed her hand weakly. "You're lying. You always were a terrible liar." Clara smiled despite herself. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm waiting for something." He studied her face. "They told me about the surgery. that there's a donor match. Clara's chest tightened. Daniel. They wouldn't tell me who. Patient confidentiality. They said. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. But I'm not stupid. Clara, I know it's you. Clara's throat closed. Daniel, please. Don't. His voice cracked. Don't lie to me, Sant. Not about this. Clara looked at her brother, 28 years old. He should be out living his life. Instead, he was trapped in this bed, dependent on machines, waiting for a piece of his sister's body to save him. Yes, she whispered. It's me. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I can't let you do this. You don't have a choice. Clara, if something goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. His voice broke. I can't lose you. You're all I have. Clara leaned forward, pressed her forehead against his. And you're all I have, which is why I'm doing this, which is why there was never any question. Daniel's tears fell. He did not try to hide them. I'm scared. I know. Me too. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, hands clasped. Finally. Clara pulled back. I have to go. Pre-op stuff. Daniel nodded, wiped his face with the back of his hand. Clara? She paused at the door. Your husband, that rich guy, does he know? Clara hesitated. Yes. Is he okay with it? Clara thought of Richard, his apology, his confusion, his strange, tentative reaching toward something he did not understand. I think he's trying. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, that's something. Clara walked out of the room, down the corridor, into the elevator. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. I'll pick you up at the hospital. 5 p.m. She stared at the message. He was showing up, like he said he would. The elevator doors opened. Clara stepped into the lobby and stopped. Eleanor Hayes stood at the information desk. Expensive coat, perfect hair, eyes like chips of ice. She turned, saw Clara. There you are. Eleanor's voice cut across the lobby. We need to talk. About your little surgery. Clara's stomach dropped, Eleanor knew, and the expression on her face made clear she intended to stop it. Eleanor Hayes did not wait for Clara to respond. She walked toward the hospital exit, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Follow me, follow. Clara's feet moved before her mind could object. Outside, a black town car idled at the curb. Eleanor's driver held the door open. Get in. Clara hesitated. I said get in. Eleanor's voice dropped to a razor's edge. Unless you want to have this conversation in public, where anyone could hear. Clara climbed into the car. Eleanor slid in beside her. The door closed. The world outside became muted glass and leather seats. The car pulled away from the curb. Eleanor did not look at her. She stared straight ahead, her gloved hands folded in her lap. I know everything, she said. The brother, the surgery, the pathetic little arrangement you made with my son. Clara's pulse thudded in her ears. She kept her voice steady. Then you know I'm not backing out. Oh, I'm counting on that. Eleanor turned her head slowly. Her eyes were cold, appraising. You think you're noble. Don't you sacrificing yourself for family? How touching. Clara said nothing. Let me tell you what I see. Eleanor's voice was smooth as polished stone. I see a woman who married my son under false pretenses, who hid a dying relative, who planned major surgery without consulting anyone, and who, if something goes wrong, will leave Richard with a scandal that could take years to clean up. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. I didn't marry Richard for his money. No. You married him for your brother's money, which is worse, in a way. Eleanor smiled thinly. At least gold diggers are honest about what they want. The car turned a corner. Buildings slid past the windows. What do you want? Clara asked. Eleanor reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope. Thick. Heavy. $50,000. Cash. Enough to pay off the rest of your brother's bills. She held out the envelope. Take it. Cancel the surgery. File for divorce. Disappear. And never contact my son again. Clara stared at the envelope. $50,000. More than she had earned in 2 years of working 3 jobs. You're bribing me. I'm offering you an exit. Eleanor's voice hardened. Take it, or don't. But if you go through with that surgery, if you risk your life and create a scandal for this family, I will make sure you regret it. I have lawyers, I have resources, I can make your brother's remaining time very uncomfortable. Clara's blood went cold. You would threaten a dying man. I would protect my family. Eleanor leaned closer. By any means necessary. The car pulled to a stop. They were back at the penthouse. Eleanor pressed the envelope into Clara's hands. You have 24 hours. After that, my offer expires, and my patience with it. The driver opened the door. Clara stepped out onto the sidewalk. Her legs felt wooden. The envelope weighed nothing and everything at the same time. The car pulled away. Eleanor's face disappeared behind tinted glass. Clara stood there, alone, the envelope burning in her hands. She could take it, pay Daniel's bills, walk away from all of this. No surgery, no risk, no more pretending to be someone she was not. But Daniel would still need a liver, and there was no other match. Clara walked into the building, rode the elevator in silence, entered the penthouse. Richard was sitting in the living room, waiting. My mother called, he said. She told me what she did. Clara stopped in the doorway. The envelope was still in her hands. And Richard stood, walked toward her. His face was unreadable. Give me the envelope. Clara did not move. Clara, give it to me. She handed it over. Richard looked at it for a moment. Then he walked to the fireplace, threw the envelope into the flames. Clara watched the money burn. $50,000 turning to ash. What are you doing? Richard did not turn around. I called her back, after she hung up with you. His voice was flat, controlled. I told her that if she interfered with your surgery, if she so much as looked at you or your brother the wrong way, I would cut her off completely. No more foundation board, no more charity galas, no more access to the Hayes name. Clara's breath caught. You threatened your own mother. I made my position clear. Richard turned to face her. The foundation board means more to her than winning this fight. She won't bother you again. Clara stared at him. This man who had humiliated her, mocked her, treated her like furniture, standing in front of a fireplace where $50,000 burned because his mother had tried to hurt her. Why? Richard's jaw tightened. Because what she did was wrong. And because I've done enough wrong to you already. I won't let anyone else add to it. Clara's eyes stung. She blinked hard. "Richard." He looked at her. "The surgery is in 2 days." "I know. I'm scared." The words came out before she could stop them. Honest, raw, the first truly honest thing she had said to him since they married. Richard nodded slowly. "I know." He stepped closer. "I'll be there. When you wake up. I'll be there." Clara looked at him, at this stranger who had become something else, something she did not have a name for yet. "Why do you care?" Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Because you showed me something I didn't know existed." His voice was rough. "You showed me that some people are actually good, not pretending. Just good." He reached out, took her hand. His grip was awkward, unpracticed, and I want to be better. I don't know how, but I want to try. Clara's hand trembled in his. "That's not nothing," she said quietly. "No." Richard's thumb moved across her knuckles. Once, gentle. "It's not." They stood like that for a moment. Two people who had started as strangers, as enemies, almost, finding something fragile and unexpected between them. Clara pulled her hand away. "I need to rest. Before the surgery." Richard nodded, stepped back. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Richard." She walked to her room, closed the door, leaned against it. Her heart was racing, not from fear, from something else entirely. The morning of December 14th arrived cold and gray. Richard drove Clara to the hospital himself. No driver, no assistant, just the two of them in his car. The city sliding past in silence. At the entrance, he stopped the car, turned to her. "Whatever happens in there, I'll handle it. The bills, the recovery, everything. You just focus on getting through." Clara nodded. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "Thank me when you wake up." Clara opened the door, paused. "Richard, yes, if something goes wrong, nothing is going to go wrong." Clara met his eyes. "But if it does, tell Daniel I love him. And tell him this was my choice. He shouldn't feel guilty." Richard's face tightened. "Tell him yourself. When this is over." Clara smiled. Small. Tired. "Okay." She stepped out of the car, walked toward the hospital entrance. At the doors, she turned back. Richard was still sitting there, watching. He raised one hand, a small wave. Clara nodded, then disappeared inside. The surgery lasted 7 hours. Richard sat in the waiting room the entire time. He did not eat, did not sleep, did not check his phone. Marcus Webb arrived at hour 3, sat beside him, said nothing. Dr. Sarah Webb came out at hour 5, updated them. Everything was proceeding normally. Clara was stable. Richard nodded, did not speak. At hour 7, Dr. Webb appeared again. This time, she was smiling. "Surgery complete. Both patients are in recovery. Clara is stable. Daniel received the transplant successfully." Richard's head dropped into his hands. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "She made it." Richard nodded. His shoulders shook slightly. "She made it." When Clara opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a white ceiling. The second thing was Richard, asleep in a chair beside her bed. His tie was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked like he had not slept in days. Clara's throat was dry, her body ached. But she was alive. She reached out, touched Richard's hand. His eyes opened immediately. Found hers. "Hey," Clara whispered. Richard's face crumpled. Just for a second. Then he composed himself. "Hey yourself. You stayed. I said I would." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, he's fine. Surgery was successful. Dr. Webb said he's already asking for you." Clara closed her eyes, let out a breath she had been holding for months. It worked. It worked. Richard's hand closed around hers, gentle, careful. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be here." Clara opened her eyes, looked at the man holding her hand, the man who had changed, who was still changing. "Thank you for showing up." Richard nodded. His eyes were wet. "I'm going to do better," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to try." Clara squeezed his hand. "That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence. The machines beeped softly. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the city. Clara closed her eyes, let herself rest. She was alive. Daniel was alive. And somewhere in the mess of everything that had happened, something new was beginning. Something fragile. Something real. 6 weeks later. Richard called a dinner. Not a dinner party. Not a social event. Just dinner. At the penthouse. With the same people who had witnessed his cruelty toward Clara. David Porter. The other men from the golf club. His mother. Clara sat at the table, still healing from surgery, still recovering, but present. Richard stood at the head of the table. "I asked you all here because there's something I need to say." The room went quiet. Forks paused mid-air, glasses lowered. "Most of you were at my wedding. You heard me call Clara a trophy. You heard me mock her. You laughed." Richard's voice was steady, flat. "I'm not blaming you for laughing. I'm the one who made the joke." Clara's hands tightened on her napkin. "But I was wrong." Richard looked directly at each person at the table. "Clara isn't a trophy. She's the most remarkable person I've ever met." Eleanor's face went pale. David Porter shifted uncomfortably in his chair. 2 weeks ago, she gave part of her liver to save her brother's life. A brother she never told me about because she didn't want me to see it as a burden. A brother who was dying while I was making jokes about her serving coffee. Richard's voice cracked. She married me because she needed money for his treatment. Not for herself. Never for herself. And I treated her like she was nothing. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong," Richard said. "About her. About what matters. About everything." He turned to face Clara directly. "I'm sorry. Not because it will fix anything, but because you deserve to hear it, in front of everyone who heard me mock you." The room was silent. Richard walked to Clara's chair, knelt beside her. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. But I want you to know for whatever time we have left together, I see you now. I see who you really are." Clara's hand found his face, her palm against his cheek. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. "To be seen." Richard closed his eyes. At the table, Eleanor Hayes sat frozen. Her perfect composure cracked. Because watching her son kneel before this woman she had tried to destroy, something shifted in her too. Something she did not have words for. David Porter cleared his throat. Stood up. I think I owe Mrs. Hayes an apology, too. One by one, the others followed. And Clara sat there, tears streaming down her face, finally receiving what she had never asked for: recognition, respect, the dignity she had always deserved. 2 months after the surgery, Daniel walked out of the hospital on his own 2 feet. Clara stood at the entrance, waiting for him, Richard beside her. The February air was cold, but the sun was out for the first time in weeks. Daniel moved slowly, carefully. A nurse walked beside him, ready to catch him if he stumbled. But he did not stumble. He reached Clara, stopped. "Hey, sis." Clara's eyes were wet. She did not try to hide it. "Hey, yourself." Daniel looked at Richard, studied him for a moment. "So you're the husband?" Richard extended his hand. "Richard Hayes." Daniel did not take it immediately. His eyes moved to Clara, then back to Richard. "She told me about you. The real version, not the polite one." Richard's hand stayed extended. His face did not change. "I imagine she did. She also told me you've been different lately." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That true? I'm trying." Daniel considered this. Then, slowly, he took Richard's hand. "Trying counts for something. My sister taught me that." They shook. Brief, firm. The nurse wheeled out a chair, but Daniel waved it away. "I'm walking to the car. I've been lying down for 11 months. I'm done with that." Clara laughed. The sound surprised her. Light, free. They walked to the car together. Slow steps. Daniel leaning slightly on Clara. Richard walking ahead to open the door. The drive to the penthouse took 20 minutes. Daniel spent most of it looking out the window at the city passing by. "I forgot how big everything is," he said quietly. "How loud." Clara squeezed his hand. "You'll get used to it again." At the penthouse, Mrs. Patterson had prepared Daniel's room. Fresh sheets, flowers on the nightstand, a stack of books Clara had picked out based on what he used to read before he got sick. Daniel stood in the doorway, looked around. "This is a lot." "Too much?" Clara asked. "No." Daniel smiled. Weak, but real. Just right. He sat on the edge of the bed, ran his hand over the blanket. "Clara." She sat beside him. "I need to say something." Daniel's voice was serious now. "What you did for me, the surgery, the money, all of it, I can never repay that. You don't have to. Let me finish." He took her hand. "But I also need you to know that I didn't want this. Not at the cost of your happiness. Not at the cost of you marrying someone who didn't love you." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Things are different now." "Are they?" Clara thought of Richard, the man who had knelt before her, who had burned $50,000, who had stayed at her bedside for 7 hours. "Yes," she said. "They are." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay, then I'm glad." He lay back on the bed, closed his eyes. "I'm tired. Rest." Clara pulled the blanket over him. "I'll be here when you wake up." She walked to the door, paused. "Daniel, I love you." "Love you too, sis." Clara closed the door behind her. In the living room, Richard stood by the window. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "How is he?" "Tired. But okay." Clara walked to stand beside him. "Thank you for letting him stay here. It's your home, too." Clara looked at him. At this man she had married for all the wrong reasons, who had treated her terribly, who was now standing beside her, trying to be someone different. Richard! Yes, what happens now? Richard was quiet for a long moment. The city stretched out below them. Cars moved like blood through arteries. Lights blinked on in distant windows. I don't know, he said finally. I've never done this before. Done what? Any of it. He turned to face her. Caring about someone else, putting someone else first, trying to be good instead of just successful. Clara studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples, the uncertainty he was still learning to show. Neither have I, she said. Not like this. Then I guess we figure it out together. Clara nodded slowly. I guess we do. They stood in silence, not touching, but closer than they had ever been. Clara, yes. I have something for you. Richard reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small box, velvet, simple. Clara's breath caught. What is this? Open it. She lifted the lid. Inside, a ring. Gold. Simple, but different from the thin band he had given her at their wedding. This one had an inscription on the inside. She tilted it toward the light. For Clara, who taught me what matters. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Richard. I know it doesn't erase anything. I know a ring is just a ring. His voice was rough. But I wanted you to have something that meant something, something that wasn't part of the arrangement, just from me, to you. Clara lifted the ring from the box, held it in her palm. Will you put it on? Richard took the ring, took her hand, slid it onto her finger beside the original band. There, he said quietly. Clara looked at her hand. 2 rings now, one from necessity, one from choice. Thank you. Richard nodded. His eyes were wet. Thank you. For giving me a chance I didn't deserve. Clara reached up, put her hand on his cheek. The same gesture from the hospital, but different now. Maybe none of us get what we deserve, she said. Maybe we just get what we're brave enough to ask for. Richard covered her hand with his. Then I'm asking. His voice cracked slightly. Can we start over? Really start over? Not as an arrangement? Not as a transaction? Just as us? Clara looked at him. This man who had been her captor and was becoming something else, something she did not have a name for yet. Yes, she said. We can try. Richard let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. Okay. He nodded. Okay. They stood by the window. The city lights glittered below. Somewhere in the apartment, Daniel was sleeping. Mrs. Patterson was preparing dinner. Life was continuing. Clara leaned her head against Richard's shoulder. He put his arm around her. Careful. Like holding something precious. Richard, yes. I think maybe this is how it starts. How what starts? Clara closed her eyes, felt his warmth beside her. Felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, something like peace. Everything